Welcome to the Colorado Business Roundtable, virtual roundtable on one of our policy pillars, which is transportation. And today we've got a great group of thought leaders on this very important topic for Colorado. And we're going to have a dialogue today about transportation, what issues are faced with Colorado pre-COVID-19 and what we're facing today as well as far as challenges around this important issue. So I'd love to welcome today our guests, and first Shoshanna Lou, who was appointed as the Executive Director for the Colorado Department of Transportation in 2018, and she is charged with leading the department in planning for and addressing Colorado's transportation needs and overseeing 3,000 employees statewide in an annual budget this year of approximately $2 billion. Prior to coming to Colorado, she served as the COO for the Rhode Island Department of Transportation and also had a distinguished career at the U.S. Department of Transportation. So welcome, Shoshana. Next, I want to welcome Mayor Jackie Millay. She's a dynamic leader with a strong record of regional consensus building and collaboration, and in particular has a specific skill set in the transportation sector and has worked to advance transit and transportation solutions throughout the Denver metro area, not just in Lone Tree, which is where she serves as mayor. Jackie is a licensed professional engineer and an elected official and has a unique perspective of bringing together public and private solutions on such a critical issue. So I want to welcome the mayor of Lone Tree, Jackie Millay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last, I want to welcome a dear friend, Sandra Solon. Sandra is the founder and head of Capital Solutions, which is a premier government relations firm here in Colorado. But she represents clients at the local, state, and federal level on a variety of business issues in particular. She founded her firm in 1992 and quickly built a very, very strong reputation, particularly in the transportation sector. Although she works for lots of different clients in the business sector, including corporate clients, Fortune 500 companies, and trade associations. So welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Debbie. So nice to be with you.
Great to be with you all. I wish we were together in person because it's so much fun to have a dialogue, and this just feels a little bit strange in this new time. But transportation is one of those pivotal issues. It's been a pillar for the Colorado Business Roundtable for good reason. It really affects everybody. And it's one of those issues that you can't just solve, in one town or solve in another town. There needs to be a real comprehensive statewide conversation and problem solving about transportation. So I'd love to just have you all kick off. Tell me a little bit more about what your mission is. Tell us a little bit about your role in Colorado and what your mission is in regards to transportation. And I'd love to kick it off to Shoshana first, and then we'll ask the mayor to weigh in as well.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you for virtually having me here today. It's nice to see you all. I'm the executive director of the Colorado Department of Transportation, so overseeing an organization of about 3,000 plus employees who are really responsible for everything from plowing the snow in the winter to thinking strategically about what we want mobility on the state network to look like. And it means that day to day we do a very dynamic variety of things, which again kind of straddle the extremely practical and then thinking about what it is that our goals are, how we execute them, how we pay for them, and how we sort of set a vision and get other people to think kind of looking forward about mobility in our state. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit over the course of this conversation, I think, is the work that we've done over the past year to develop a strategic 10-year pipeline of projects that really spells out what we want mobility along the statewide system to look like.
Perfect. Mayor, tell us more about you.
Thanks again, and it is wonderful to see all of you. I usually get to be in the room with lots of you, but I appreciate seeing faces. So, pre-COVID, transportation has been really integral to the city of Lone Tree. Our city sits at the intersection of I-25 and C-470, so transportation has been part of the DNA since our city was formed 25 years ago. And I think we recognize that the ability of people and goods to move in, out, and through our community makes a huge difference, not just to commerce, but to quality of life for the people in the city. And we recognize that we are part of a bigger transportation network. Solving problems within the city of Lone Tree does not just address the traffic problems that my constituents, my businesses face. as home to the largest retail resort or mall in the city of Lone Tree, getting goods in and out of the city is also extremely important to us as well. So I think it's been a privilege to actually partner with with the women here, but also the broader Denver metro region and the state to kind of try and address a comprehensive statewide transportation system that really serves the needs of all people and our businesses.
Perfect. And I really like hearing about Park Meadows Mall. I can't wait for that to open again so we can, so I live and work in the Denver Tech Center as well as a little bit downtown, but really enjoy everything about the area that you represent specifically.
Well, I have to tell you, it is run by one of the most dynamic women, Pam Kelly, that any of us could ever hope to meet. And she has done a phenomenal job really putting together a plan to safely reopen the mall and make sure that it adheres to all of the social distancing and public health guidance that we need. So we're excited about welcoming everybody back to the city of Lone Tree.
Great. And Sandra, last but not least, tell us a little bit more about your firm and what you've done in the transportation space to kind of help us set the stage.
Perfect. Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. And I'm here today because I represent an organization called Fix Colorado Roads, which is an outgrowth of an effort out of Northern Colorado and the Chambers of Commerce up there to really have this conversation about funding transportation and addressing the significant concerns and need that exist within the transportation network. And Shoshana will speak a little bit more about the details of that, but we are, as a business organization, an economic development organization, primarily concerned about the important network that exists throughout the state. It is the essential backbone of commerce and the ability to move people and goods across the state is critical. We align with Chambers of Commerce across the state as an organization, Fix Colorado Roads, and have found great success over the last several years in building and driving the conversation forward, pardoning the pun, to ensure that more and more funds are being delivered to CDOT. In the last year, we've partnered with a number of folks, including the mayor, with regard to how do we move this conversation forward to engage the public in understanding their role in the process. That was pre-COVID, of course, and so the dynamic and the conversation has shifted dramatically, but we remain committed to ensuring that we have a strong foundation economically, which is directly tied to our transportation infrastructure.
And just a follow-up question, Sandra, when you talk about fix our roads, do you mean just roads specifically? I know this is an interesting sort of setup too when we talk about transportation. Sometimes I just think about, I just want to get up I-70, and that's my thought when I think about transportation. But for all three of you, I suspect it's a much broader conversation than just a specific road plan.
It is. Fix Colorado Roads is most certainly much broader than just the road infrastructure. It is the entire transportation network. There's a relatable aspect to using the term roads, but most certainly it is much broader in ensuring that we have overall mobility throughout the state of Colorado. But we know that the concept was born, again, out of Northern Colorado and a challenge we had in North I-25, where we were told that about 5 years ago that we wouldn't see that stretch of highway expanded until 2075. And we said, yeah, that's not the right answer. And we recognized that the challenge on the roadways was shared throughout the state. And so that's what really drove us to begin to collaborate with our chamber and economic development partners along with other organizations throughout the state.
And Shoshana, do you want to add anything to that conversation for viewers who aren't thinking about transportation in a realistic way? You know, what avenues make up transportation when you think of the topic for your department?
Absolutely. You know, when we think about the topic, you know, it's a diverse array of users, and different people use different forms of transportation on different hours of the day and different days of the week. You know, you think about where we are all right now, and we're commuting virtually. You think about some days you're a driver, some days you're a pedestrian. You know, all of us in the course of our lives go through being a user of many different types of transportation. You know, the way I think about the system that we oversee at CDOT, it's a system of roads that's the foundation, for a variety of different means of mobility. We can use the same, stretch of concrete or asphalt, to move, a bus, a car, a truck, a bicycle, a person walking. And, in some way, the more comprehensively we think about having a strong foundation that we can use for a variety of purposes that even change over time, because technology changes over time, that to me is the way that we start the conversation within the sort of CDOT purview. Because if there's a pothole, there's a pothole, and whoever or whatever is going over it trips just the same. So, thinking about that base infrastructure as moving a system that changes nimbly over time and has a variety of users is sort of the way I think about the answer to your question. Good question.
Okay. And I'll have a follow-up for you as well, and kind of shift gears. It's interesting to think about public policy and what we were all concerned about in January 2020. And in some ways,
the good old days. The good old days.
I wish we were back, worried about, traffic
congestion. Yeah.
Because then we wouldn't be worried about health and safety issues with COVID-19, what we're seeing in terms of economic issues as well. But when we think about what were the challenges, and Shoshana, I'll start with you as well on this, what challenges were top of mind for you in January, and how have you had to shift sort of your focus in terms of planning and strategy now in kind of this, this different environment?
Sure. Boy, can the world change fast, is what we've all learned. I think the first thing that really struck me during this event was, you think about the roads differently in a kind of prolonged moment of crisis where, what you're thinking about is moving emergency goods and services and, the sort of most vital things that keep people able to live their lives in a strange period of time. So, from what that meant that our day-to-day in the crisis looked like, suddenly what was moving was food to the grocery store or goods that people used to go out to get, that suddenly the only way to get them for a period of time was to have deliveries, the movement of medical supplies, the movement of sort of critical services from one place to another. And frankly, thinking about, the impact, of the tragedies that we deal with on the roadway in terms of how it relates to other aspects of capacity of our medical system. So, I think we for a period of time have had this sort of very clear and, different but sort of crystal clear view of our system as, moving these very basic things that we take for granted, but are hard to take for granted now because we're in such a sort of strange moment of time. And, for me, the experience of these past 2 months has been about, seeing what transportation does, in a moment like that, of being able to kind of keep things moving even when they're not normal. I think moving into the future, there's obviously a very complicated economic change that we're going through. And, we, like every other aspect of government, are having hard conversations about what happens when there's less revenue coming into the system. Because, it's not rocket science that if people aren't driving, the gas tax revenues go down. And, every aspect of state and local budgeting is taking a hit in a similar way. And, these kind of macro things that we think of as the state fiscal situation or the local fiscal situation, translated to roads and parks and, water treatment and all of the stuff that we take for granted.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really true. It becomes such an interesting time for budget priorities, and perhaps that's a question to throw down to Sandra as you do a lot of work and heavy lifting at the state capitol, talking to legislators about budget priorities, even on a year when we might have had a surplus. Wasn't that long ago we were thinking about what to do with that. So, Sandra, over to you. Kind of, what's your take on the current environment regarding transportation funding now that we're in this sort of new normal from an economic perspective?
Yeah, we prior to the change in pace, there was a lot of conversation about how we utilize and maximize some general funds, coupled with new types of revenue sources, and that conversation has dramatically shifted as you can imagine. I think we are realistic to understand and appreciate the opportunity for general funds at this juncture is less than likely. The general fund has been, and the legislature has been pretty generous over the last several years from general fund dollars into the system. And we're very fortunate, Shoshana is ensuring that particular round of funding from leveraged dollars will become a reality, which will provide some needed cash infusion into the system that had been planned for, and we're particularly concerned that it wouldn't be realized, but fortunate to and commend her for her work to ensure that that will be a reality. But we have to be realistic about what dollars can come from the state in light of a $3 billion shortfall with the state general fund. That said, we are committed, and I know others within our transportation sort of network and community partners are committed to pushing the federal government in ways in which we can perhaps see some stimulus coming and dollars coming into the state that can be used and leveraged in a way that's really meaningful. In many respects, from my perspective, we shift to it. Is transportation perhaps a means by which we can provide jobs for displaced workers in various sectors? We've seen transportation used as an economic stimulus in recessions past, and it would be nice to see that type of engagement and dollars directed towards transportation in Colorado and, quite frankly, across the country as well.
And I believe those conversations are taking place. Is that right, Sandra, as far as what needs we might see in Colorado in regards to federal stimulus?
Yeah, I believe so, and Shoshana can speak to that, and perhaps Mayor Millay has a little bit more insight there because it's directly tied to the local and state dollars that are being debated right now at the federal level as well. But my understanding is, yes, that is an important part of the discussion that's happening right now in Congress.
Okay.
And we have had very, very good feedback from our our federal senators, Senator Gardner and Senator, okay, I'm drawing a blank. Help me out, ladies.
Senator Bennett.
Senator Bennett, he has been amazing. And I have to say, Senator Bennett has done tremendous outreach to the local governments to make sure that our thoughts and concerns are being carried forward. And I couldn't agree with Sandra more about the idea of using transportation investments to stimulate our economy. When we have invested in transportation in our local communities and in our state, we have seen a huge return in private sector investment in communities. We've seen a huge return in putting people to work and I think revitalizing our economy. In 2008, I was just elected to the Lone Tree City Council. Lucky me, I get to serve during our two great economic, and I'll take the economic crises over a public health crisis any day. But what we found in the city of Lone Tree was cash is king coming out of that. And communities that had dollars to invest in infrastructure were able to accomplish a lot. We were able to get a lot more value for our dollars, and we were able to put people to work and keep them at work and then see business invest afterwards. So I do think there is a great opportunity if we do see some stimulus money coming from the federal government to really deploy it wisely throughout our state in investing in transportation. And if I could just go back for a minute to the earlier question about what are the pain points, I think it's important to note that 75% of the paved lane miles in Colorado are maintained by local cities, towns, and county governments. And we are experiencing significant pinches is a nice way of saying it, cuts in our budgets as well. And I think as we move forward beyond this economic and public health crisis, I think we are going to have to look carefully about how we are funding transportation in the state of Colorado. And I think good use of general fund dollars is extremely important, but I will continue to advocate that we do need to bring new funding sources to the table to adequately fund the robust transportation system that we need to provide the economic prosperity to the state that we can achieve. So thanks.
I appreciate that. And I want to come back to funding sources in a minute. But before I do that, Mayor, would love to get your sense just as far as, what other issues in Colorado really deserve this sort of regional collaboration? As you mentioned at the beginning, being the mayor of a city of Lone Tree, which is at such a pivotal place as far as people coming and going through that region, but yet you serve businesses and people who are all over Colorado. So kind of a patchwork approach doesn't really work. So I'd love your input on how you're using your voice as the mayor of Lone Tree. How is that critical for everybody to work together on a bigger picture approach and perhaps additional funding as well?
Well, in the Denver metro area, there are two very important organizations that really look at regional collaboration for local governments. One is the Denver Regional Council of Governments, and I was fortunate to chair that organization for almost 2 years. And they look at not only transportation solutions, but it is the Area Agency on Aging. So it's serving the senior population, and also looked at some veteran programs as well, were overseen and funded through the Dr. Cog funding program. The other organization, which I'm currently the vice chair of, is the Metro Mayor's Caucus. And the Metro Mayor's Caucus looks at issues affecting all of the mayors. There are 40 of us that belong to that group. And the primary things we collaborate on are really transportation has been a priority for the organization almost since day one. And also the homeless issue is also an extremely important issue for the Metro Mayor's Caucus, and it's something we've been devoting time and resources to as well. In the current health crisis, the mayors have been getting together weekly on a phone call to talk about the COVID response and recovery, and we will be collaborating on some kind of an economic recovery plan and talking about best practices and coming together to see what we can do as a region and as a state to move our fragile economy forward and get back to the thriving, prosperous economy that we did see. So as the mayor, even though I'm a mayor of a small community, there are opportunities to collaborate. And I think they're very, very important, particularly for mayors of small communities, to make sure that the voice of Lone Tree is heard along with the voices of Aurora and the city of Denver.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for your service, by the way. It's interesting that you said you sort of are in these leadership positions in government during economic crisis. So,
yeah.
You know, I don't know what that says, but appreciate your willingness to serve. I know it's sort of something that you have to just feel called to do to some degree to be a public servant nowadays. So it's a tough time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
Let's kind of talk about funding. I was going to say it's kind of the elephant in the room, but that's always sort of a trick, isn't it? You know, there's limited resources. Everyone's competing for dollars. In a perfect world, maybe pre-COVID, there had been opportunities for funding might not be available now, or now we're seeing some federal stimulus opportunity. But would love to just open it up to whoever might like to answer the question. And I don't know that you know, with so many people now out of work, you know, there's sort of this interesting sense of, you know, any kind of a tax increase now is probably not going to be met with open arms. It never is, but maybe now less so. But who wants to tackle that? Like, how do we solve some of these big problems with finite resources?
Well, I'm going to say what has worked in the past is going to continue to work in the future. It's collaboration. And Sandra spoke to it really about how the organization that she represents kind of came together to solve a problem and solve a transportation problem. And I think in the short term, we're absolutely going to be looking to bring people together at the state, local, federal, private, public sectors to come together and address these issues, because there isn't one entity that has the capacity to solve it, particularly the financial aspects of it. And love the fellow panelists to react.
Well, I would add to that in addition to things like collaboration, being consistent, you know, having clear goals and priorities, yes, you know, is as important in good times as it is in less good times. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that we spent the past year, you know, really digging into the kind of priorities of the state, working very closely with all of our partners. You know, everyone on this call was involved in that conversation. And really just coming up with a clear plan for what we would do with resources. And, you know, the theory of the case was you need a clear picture of what you're solving for before you talk about how to solve it. You know, what we're finding now is that, you know, we were, you know, thinking about what we would do with more resources then. You know, the reality now is we're probably looking at what you do with fewer resources. But you know, the exercise that helps you think about how to, you know, go bigger can also help you think about doing a good job going smaller, right? You know, you can do each of those things analytically, and you can do each of those things in a way that is more equitable. And you know, the same kinds of thought processes that help you figure out how to kind of go up can help you, you know, if you need to contract. You know, the message that we've been carrying is that plan that we developed and the sort of vision for what we want hasn't changed. What we're talking about is a difference in, how much money we have to execute at once, which, the math is pretty simple, right? If we have less money, it'll take longer, but it doesn't change what the goal is. And, you don't set goals to give up on them when it gets a little bit harder to do it. In fact, it can help motivate you to get through a time when there's hard decisions to be made. So, what we're finding right now is that the exact same exercise in prioritization that, was helping us dream big is helping us, think strategically and rationally about how to potentially manage cuts. To get back to the question about the money for a minute, we are lucky that we have, a base to work with. It's the Treasurer's Office has been doing, incredible work over the past month, working towards that second issuance of certificates of participation, even during a time when the market is very hard to manage. So, we don't have it yet, but we're on a path that's, I think, very linear right now, and in a way that just reflects a lot of continued very hard work during a hard time. I think the reality, though, is that our budget in total, as with our local partners across the state, is going to take some cuts. There is a possibility, of some federal aid coming in, and I think the sort of hard reality of that is that, folks sometimes think about stimulus as adding on more things to, inject, a shot in the arm into the economy. And this gets to a point that Sandra made earlier. Our starting point is trying to protect what we thought we had before. So, with the cuts to budgets that are happening, across the country at the state and local level, cities, counties, states everywhere, is that revenue that was sort of anticipated in the budget is suddenly not there. So, what that means is that the dollars that have to come in order to be able to not cut things that you thought you were going to do, are in excess of what you expected. So this, these conversations in Washington that are, you talk about them in big macro terms, state fiscal relief, local fiscal relief. What that means is about thinking about how to shore up, basic services, whether it's, paving roads or paying firefighters or, dealing with, teacher salaries or waterways, all of these basic services that are taking hits to their, most fundamental budget because of, the lack of revenue that you heard the mayor talk about that's just not coming in. So that's what that conversation is all about. And, transportation's in a, rocky boat with everybody else in this one. So, I think that from the federal perspective, these conversations are quite inextricable because what's happening with the gas tax is the same as what's happening with the sales tax, which is the same as what's happening, with bases of revenue that everyone relies upon.
Yeah. Income tax, all the buckets of revenue that funds local, state, and federal government are going to be affected for who knows how long.
I would just chime in that both of our federal senators have really been fighting hard for all of us.
Yes, they absolutely have. They absolutely have. And Senator Bennett has done tremendous work, and I apologize that his name escaped me because he really has done a phenomenal job reaching out.
And Debbie, might I add on this conversation, Shoshana pointed out the incredible work that the department has done over the course of last year to really do the planning necessary. I think probably arguably one of the more forward-looking states around planning on transportation, which sets us up well. As she noted, we'll have holes to fill, but it also sets us well should we find ourselves with additional funds. But I think the reality is, as we look to the future and overall funding of the state, we have to be mindful of the fact that this situation will change behaviors considerably. Either folks are staying home more frequently and working from home, or as an IBM study just released, I think yesterday, shows there are a lot of folks who are reluctant. 20% of users of the transit system are hesitant to continue using it into the near term. That changes the utilization of the roads. They'll be jumping in cars instead of on the buses. And so all of that combined will dramatically shift how much impact there is upon our transportation network. And so the conversation around funding has to similarly sort of shift in terms of how we achieve the objectives that we need to achieve long-term for continued economic strength of the state.
And that's an excellent point. I had it in one of my questions, just as far as the mix of what the different needs are. And I have a daughter who's 25 who is an incredible user of RTD light rail for the year that she worked downtown. She found it incredibly helpful and very, very, I don't think she even had a car during that period of time. So, you know, it will be interesting. And I don't know if any of you want to address that, like what the mix is currently and what we might project out as far as priorities for Coloradans and budget needs and that kind of thing.
Well, I think the RTD issue for the metro region is a very interesting one. And I know that they are in the process of putting together a recovery plan, and it's kind of a return to transit plan. In addition to that plan, they're also working on a Reimagine RTD plan, which I serve on a advisory board for that. And that's really to look at the long-term system development and operating plan for RTD out through 2050. And I think this is an interesting time for them to be contemplating what 2050 may look like given what we see today. I think there is no doubt that we will see a return to transit because it is such an integral part of our multimodal system. We cannot support the businesses and the economy we have in the metro region without a robust transit system. We know RTD was struggling with some challenges with workforce and with revenues prior to this. I think they've been hit hard by some of the ride sharing or you know, the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world. And I think they need to step up and respond to that. I think that this, you know, was it Winston Churchill who said, never always take advantage of a good crisis? Well, we can't get a better crisis than this one right now. So I think there's important work to be done at RTD. And I know I, for one, my community made a significant investment in RTD. And we are looking to partner with them to bring back their system to as even better than what it was before, ensuring that public health and safety are prioritized, as it has always been. We're going to have some new best practices, but I think they're an integral part of not just the metro region, but frankly, the state system. All of our transit systems are. So, Shoshana, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, that we're in a very unusual period of time right now, to state the completely obvious. And, you know, I think none of us quite know what it's going to look like 6 months from now from a mobility perspective, because, you know, some things, you know, it was interesting. We were doing an all hands meeting with part of my staff last week, and someone asked the question, like, so what are the things that we're doing right now are going to stick? And it was a great question, because it, you know, got me thinking that, you know, you don't come out of an experience like this without learning some things that can, you know, make things work better in the future. And, you know, even for all of the sort of peculiarity of communicating, you know, virtually when we're used to being in the same room, you know, and this is what I said in the meeting with my staff, you know, our organization is spread across the whole state. You know, under the best of circumstances, I wouldn't get to see the team who works in Durango very often. And I actually see more of them now than I did. And you know, now that I'm accustomed to being able to communicate in this way, it actually can sort of reduce the feeling of being far away for people who actually are. So, you know, I think some of the things that we've learned about the possibilities of telework and being able to communicate virtually in lieu of in person are things that will make us able to work better in the future. You know, it doesn't mean that we'll, you know, be at home the number of hours a day we are now, but, you know, it's not, I don't think it's going to necessarily, or that we want it to bounce back to exactly what it was before, because there's things that we'll take out of this that will make our lives richer and more productive. You know, at the same time, you know, it will be important for it not to be scary to take a bus, you know, when we come out the other end, and sort of figuring out what the new normal will look like, you know, in the future with respect to health and safety on transit is going to be something we have to think through. Look, it's if we come out of this with you know, hygiene protocols that are, you know, a little tighter than they were before, you know, it might be good for people being healthier, you know, when they're out in public in the best of circumstances. So, you know, I think there's a lot to be learned from it, but, you know, there will certainly be, you know, a period of transitioning between where we are right now and, you know, where we'll be some type of head of now. And, you know, it's going to in some ways look different from a transportation perspective, but some things will be, you know, closer to the way they were before, and I don't think we know just yet.
Well said. I think there's opportunities, and thank you for your leadership, Shoshana, because as you've said, it's, you know, we can still have the same challenges and be very fluid. I think probably that's one of the interesting takeaways from my work with other business leaders, and we're able to get on conference calls with other business roundtables around the country to talk about how each state is opening up and how each state is handling some of these pivotal challenges. And I'm so optimistic when coming from Colorado because of our leadership that we have. We've already mentioned our U.S. senators, our leadership in the governor's leadership with Shoshana and what she's trying to do to help solve transportation for us. It really, I feel like Colorado has such a unique set of entrepreneurs and risk takers and innovators, whether it's the private sector or government, and working together, we've got a shot at kind of getting through this and coming out stronger on the other side. So with that, I know we're a little bit, we're going to wrap up, but I'd love for each of you to have a chance to give some closing remarks on what you'd like our viewers to know about transportation and what you're working on. Primarily, this video will go to other folks in the business community, but also higher ed and some of our elected officials as well. So let me just have Sandra start, and we'll kind of go around with any closing comments you want to give regarding transportation.
Well, thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and to see my friends, Mayor Millay and Shoshana. It's been a real pleasure to have this conversation, which is so critical. And while each of us was working tirelessly on this issue before, the change in pace, we know that we continue to have an important issue ahead of us, and the business community is so essential to this conversation, and your members are integrally linked to the forward look that we will continue to need to have and support to ensure that we have a transportation system and economic system that works for everyone. Thank you.
And Sandra, before I tell us the website if folks want to hear more about the coalition that you're leading.
FixColoradoRoads.org, simple. And yeah, invite you to go there. We also have Fix North I-25, which is a subset of Fix Colorado Roads as well.
Thank you. Mayor, closing comments?
Yes, well, first I want to let everyone know it is actually Clean Air Week here in I think it's in the country, but in Colorado. And I think one of the important and maybe only few benefits of this shutdown of our state during this public health order has been the improved air quality that we have seen. I think it has been dramatic, and we are thrilled to have it, and it could not come at a better time. I think mobile sources, cars, SUVs, light trucks are the second largest contributor to poor air quality in the metro area. And so I think we've learned a lot with the ability to telework and remote work. And as we move out of this crisis, I think employee trip reduction can be an important tool that we use to continue to maintain good air quality in the metro area and in our state. So I think let's keep that activity moving forward. That's one thing we don't want to see dramatically change back. And in addition to that, I want to echo the sentiments that I think a multimodal transportation system is really essential for a successful community, but it's even more important at the state level to have regional prosperity and statewide prosperity. And I think the investments that we make in moving people and goods throughout our community give access to education, they give access to jobs, they give access to healthcare, and I think really impact the quality of life that we see as Coloradans. I think not all of us were fortunate enough to be born here, but I think what we're all here for is that quality of life, and I think our transportation network is an important piece of that, and I want to make sure we continue to invest in it. So thanks.
Great. And Shoshana, you can close us out.
Sure. I think I would stress that it's important, given, in a world where there's suddenly a lot of commotion, to sort of stay focused and stay kind of analytical about the things that mattered to us before. Because, again, reiterating some of what I've said, the fact of being able to stay focused on what the basics are that we need to accomplish and not get distracted by the fact that the world is very distracting, I think will result in kind of better and more thoughtful outcomes in the end. So, we're trying to sort of show our work through the work that we're doing with the Transportation Commission, so that people can see how we do hard choices and maintain our priorities. But I think being able to have a rational conversation about it, is even more important now, knowing that it was always important before. It becomes harder when the waters around us are kind of rocky, but it's still possible. And I think all of us have the ability to kind of steer towards logical outcomes that will help improve our mobility, help keep our economy strong during a hard time, and, help us weather the storm collectively. I'd actually end by reminding everyone to drive safely. We've been seeing with heavier roads, there's been, unfortunately, some very, very erratic driving, resulting in, a lower reduction in traffic incidents than a reduction in traffic. And, it just reminds us that particularly in the midst of a, health crisis, we need to be mindful of safe practices on our roads.
Good reminder. Well, thank you, ladies. I just realized this is the first time I think I've had all wonderful women leaders on a call. It's so interesting that it worked out, but really fun to be with you all, and really thankful for your leadership in our state on so many different levels, whether it's running the Department of Transportation, Mayor Millay, using your voice so powerfully in your city and with other mayors, and Sandra, with what you do at the state capitol, representing the voice of business and transportation issues so ably for our state. Appreciate all of you very much, and want to thank everyone who's taken the time to view this video. This is brought to you by Colorado Business Roundtable, and we help tell the story of business being a force for good in Colorado, and understanding the interconnectivity of the success of business, and that when business is successful, it really is about people, and understanding that that leads to the success in Colorado as well. So thanks for joining us.